Chosen one, not everything they did to you was meant to hurt just a little. It was meant to break you, silence you, erase you. But here you are. Not erased, not broken, not silent. They tried, and they planned, and they plotted. But they forgot one thing. They forgot who walks with you. What they meant for evil, God turned for your rising. This video is your reminder. You're still standing because God didn't let the enemy's plan stand. Watch until the end, because by the time you finish, something inside you will shift forever. Before we begin, chosen one, this is your sacred space, a place where heaven and earth align. Watch this video all the way through and let it speak directly to your soul. And write your warmest wishes in the comments and write Amen along with the number 99. Let this be a moment where wishes come true and the universe feels the pulse of your faith. Chosen one, show your alignment by liking this video and joining the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. Everything brought you here. Let's begin. They thought the pit was the end of your story. But what they didn't understand was that the pit was only the introduction to a much greater narrative, one not authored by betrayal, but by divine elevation. The pain they inflicted, the lies they spread, the isolation they forced on you, all of it was carefully designed, not by God, but by people who underestimated the resilience placed inside of you by the Creator. But God, in His unseen strategy, turned what they formed against you into the very foundation beneath your rise. You weren't supposed to make it out with your sanity intact. You weren't supposed to smile again, love again, trust again. You weren't supposed to carry the light in your eyes after everything they did to dim it. But you did. You walked through fire and didn't get burned the way they expected. And now that you're still here, breathing, believing, building, your very existence is the evidence that God reversed the intention of evil and rerouted it for good. They saw your potential early. That's why they came at you so hard. They knew, even when you didn't, that you were destined for something they couldn't reach. Their fear turned to jealousy. Their jealousy turned to sabotage. And their sabotage became your sacred training ground. They didn't break you. They built you into someone who can't be broken anymore. Every knife in your back was redirected into a step under your feet. People will pretend to support you just long enough to locate your weak spots. Some smiled at you only to sharpen the blade behind the curtain. But every single betrayal that was meant to ruin you was intercepted. Every trap they set triggered their own downfall, not yours. What they meant for evil, God turned into promotion, protection, perspective. You don't walk like you used to, because now you walk with proof. Chosen one, there are people still trying to figure out how you made it. They saw what you went through. They counted you out. They expected you to fold. But instead, you rose. Not because the circumstances got easier, but because God was working behind closed doors. When you cried in secret, heaven was plotting in silence. When you lost your way, God rerouted the map. Every moment that tried to bury you only planted you deeper into divine purpose. You became unfamiliar to people who used to know you. That's what happens when God turns it. Your language changes, your posture shifts, your priorities evolve. You start making decisions from wisdom, not wounds. You stop shrinking yourself to be tolerated by rooms you were never meant to sit in comfortably. You realize that favor can't be stopped by envy, and destiny cannot be delayed by gossip. You begin to glow with the fire they tried to put out. Some people tried to attach themselves to your destruction, not knowing they were making themselves irrelevant to your deliverance. They witnessed the beginning of your story but were never granted access to the victory chapter. Why? Because God saw their intent. You didn't have to expose them. God removed them. You didn't have to retaliate. God vindicated you in silence. That's why your peace became your revenge. That's why your success became your shield. They talked. They mocked. They celebrated too early. But God wasn't finished with you yet. The same voices that once whispered rumors behind your back will now be forced to watch your rise in public. and they won't understand it. Because divine reversals don't come with explanations. They come with results. God didn't need their permission to lift you, and now you don't need their approval to shine. They expected you to retaliate, but you healed instead. They wanted you to hate them, but you forgave and moved forward. They wanted you bitter, but you became better. That's the twist they didn't see coming. That's the reversal that proves God was always in the room. Not everything that hurt you was meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal you. They tried to label you with their projections, but you stepped out with identity, clarity, and fire. Chosen one, every setup was really a setup for divine success. Every rejection was redirection. Every delay was preparation. Every closed door was God's protection. And now you're about to walk through a door no man can shut, not even the ones who tried to block you from the hallway. The irony is rich. They built traps for you and fell into their own nets. They designed storms, but forgot who controls the wind. And just when they thought the silence meant you were defeated, God was crafting something breathtaking behind the veil. They mistook your quiet for quitting. But the truth is, you were being refined, restored, repositioned. And now, when you speak, it's with power. Now, when you move, it's with purpose. Now, when you appear, it's with evidence that something divine was always unfolding beneath the chaos. You are proof that what was meant for evil cannot override what is meant by God. You are the manifestation of resilience, the embodiment of reversal, the walking confirmation that divine timing never loses. You were not forgotten. You were being prepared. You were not overlooked. You were being protected. And now that the time has come, there is no stopping what's already been turned in your favor. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them sit in the confusion of your comeback. Because what God did in your life wasn't meant to make sense. It was meant to shift atmospheres. It was meant to flip the script. It was meant to remind every watching eye that the chosen don't lose. They evolve. You didn't come this far just to survive. You came to lead, to light, to launch something that hell couldn't cancel. You're not bitter about the past. You're grateful. Because without their plans, you wouldn't have discovered the depth of your endurance. You wouldn't have heard God's whisper in the wilderness. You wouldn't have learned how powerful you truly are when backed by the unseen. So yes, they meant it for evil, but they forgot one thing. God turns ashes into beauty. And now, your life is becoming the masterpiece they never imagined. They celebrated too early. They mistook your collapse for your conclusion. But what they witnessed was not your end. It was your turning point. The moment where everything began to shift in your favor, silently and spiritually. While they were talking, mocking, plotting, you were healing, rising, transforming. And that transformation was not cosmetic. It was internal. It was sacred. It was divine. What they meant for evil was used by God to activate the very parts of you they feared the most. Your calling, your fire, your undeniable resilience. Some of the people who were closest to you were never for you. You sensed it early. You felt it in the hesitations, in the subtle digs, in the way they praised you in public and questioned you in private. But you gave them grace, hoping they'd grow, hoping they'd see. Yet they chose to betray rather than build. They chose envy over loyalty. And God saw it all. Not one silent tear, not one heavy night, not one buried heartbreak was missed. God recorded it all, because God had a plan. Not to just vindicate you, but to elevate you where no slander could reach. When your name was slandered, when your intentions were twisted, when your goodness was mocked, it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. God was removing you from circles too small to handle your next level. And that removal felt like rejection. But it was divine redirection. You weren't being pushed out. You were being pulled up. God was extracting you from fake alliances, empty rooms, and dusty tables that served no nourishment for your purpose. They assumed your delay meant denial. They assumed the silence meant defeat. But the silence was sacred. It was where God did the deepest work in you. The kind of work that doesn't announce itself with noise. The kind of transformation that doesn't demand attention. The kind that roots itself deep, until one day, you re-emerge unrecognizable, in strength, in purpose, in poise. That's what happened to you, chosen one. You didn't just survive the plot, you outgrew it. There are moments in life where everything seems like it's falling apart. But in those moments, God is often assembling something you can't yet see. The dismantling was divine. What was removed from your life didn't leave. It was evicted. It didn't walk out. It was extracted. Because where God is taking you, not everything and not everyone can come. That's what they didn't understand. Their exit was their limitation. Your survival was your upgrade. Now that you've been through the fire, you no longer panic when flames appear. Now that you've walked through betrayal, you no longer break when someone switches sides. You've seen enough, felt enough, lost enough, and yet, here you are. Stronger, calmer, clearer. You don't react the same because you're not the same. You don't seek revenge because God already handled the balance sheet. You don't speak on what you survived. You show it in how you carry yourself. And it shows. Oh, it shows. Your energy has shifted. Your presence is heavier. Not with burden, but with blessing. Not with pain, but with power. And they feel it. They see it. And it unsettles the same people who once delighted in your pain. They don't know how to treat you now because they can't recognize this version of you. And that's okay. They're not supposed to. This version wasn't made for them. It was made through the storm they never expected you to outlive. God used their malice to sharpen your discernment. God used their silence to amplify your voice. God used their plans to reroute your journey into sacred territory. This was no accident. Your life has been a series of divine reversals. Moments where the natural looked final, but the supernatural interrupted it. You weren't lucky. You were chosen. You weren't spared by chance. You were protected by purpose. And now, your life is echoing with grace. They'll look at you and wonder how you keep glowing, how you keep rising, how you keep finding peace after so much chaos. Let them wonder. Let them wrestle with your resilience. Because when they sowed destruction, they didn't realize they were watering a garden. When they threw dirt on your name, they didn't realize it was the soil for your breakthrough. They tried to bury you, not realizing you were a seed. And now, you're sprouting in places they never imagined you'd reach. You're becoming in silence what they tried to undo in noise. And the most beautiful part is, you don't even need to explain it. You've outgrown explanations. You've surpassed small conversations. You don't correct their narratives anymore. You let your fruit speak. You let your peace speak. You let your favor speak. God has made a public example out of what was once your private pain, and not for revenge, but for glory, so that others can see what happens when God gets involved in the mess, so that others can be encouraged that pain is not final, that betrayal is not the end, that no weapon, no plot, no lie can cancel what has already been written in heaven's script. What they meant for evil made you pray deeper. It made you move smarter. It made you feel clearer. They accidentally helped you access the very version of yourself they feared you'd become. And now, that version is walking into rooms they never imagined you'd enter. That version is carrying weight they never thought you'd hold. That version is unlocking doors they tried to close with slander. You were never made to fit their limited expectations. You were made to break every mold they tried to trap you in. That's why you always felt the tension. That's why you always sensed the spiritual warfare. Because even before the blessing was visible, The battle was undeniable. But now the tide has turned. The season has shifted. What they meant for evil is being recycled into your richest season of favor. God's fingerprints are all over your survival. His signature is in your story. Not one moment was wasted. Every tear became a seed. Every loss became a lesson. Every betrayal became a catalyst. And now, everything they meant for harm is being used to catapult you into the kind of joy, peace, and fulfillment they can't touch. Your enemies built the platform. God used it to showcase your glory. They'll say you changed, and they're right. But not in the way they think. You didn't become bitter. You became bolder. You didn't close your heart. You opened your eyes. You didn't grow cold. You grew guarded. And not because of fear, but because of wisdom. You learned how to protect what God planted. You learned how to guard the promise. You learned how to cherish what they tried to curse. You're not fighting for a seat at their table anymore. You've built your own. You're not asking to be seen anymore. You've realized that God never took his eyes off you. You're not begging for acceptance anymore. You've been chosen, set apart, appointed. And that realization is shaking the foundations of everything they once tried to hold over you. Let them have their opinions. Let them cling to their old version of you. You're not called to defend your destiny. You're called to walk in it. And every step forward is a silent thunder that reminds the atmosphere, you made it. Not because of their approval, but because of divine intervention. There was a moment, silent, private, sacred, when you felt it shift. Not the environment, not the people, but something inside you. A quiet awareness, a divine ignition. The moment when you stopped asking, why me? And started realizing it had to be me. Because no one else could have handled it the way you did. No one else could have stood in the fire and walked out carrying the flame. They threw storms your way, but they didn't know you'd been built in thunder. They created chaos, not knowing peace had already taken residence in your spirit. They couldn't stop what was written. They only delayed what was divine. And even then, God used the delay to develop something greater in you. Maturity, insight, spiritual muscle. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, it simply stands. The kind of discernment that doesn't argue, it simply exits. The kind of wisdom that no degree can give, only fire can teach. That's what you carry now. Not just survival, but refined power. Hardened not by bitterness, but by glory. You started noticing the shifts, not in the room, but in yourself. You no longer waited for validation. You no longer needed applause. The version of you that rose from the ashes didn't crave attention. It carried authority. You walk into places now with a quiet boldness that unnerves the very ones who tried to destroy you. And that's not arrogance. That's alignment. Because when God turns evil into elevation, your posture changes. You no longer beg. You no longer chase. You no longer fold. You walk in the awareness that what they meant to harm you made you holy. They meant to silence you, but instead, your voice grew louder, first in heaven, then in the earth. They meant to drain you, but you tapped into a divine reservoir they couldn't see. They meant to strip you down, but God was using every tear, every lonely night, every whispered lie as a layer in your covering. You're clothed now not just in grace, but in experience. You don't just speak, you testify. You don't just walk, you leave footprints of favor wherever you go. They underestimated your comeback because they overestimated their control. They thought they held the final word, but the word they forgot was God. God saw your pain. God stood in the fire with you. God allowed the storm not to drown you, but to disconnect you from what could no longer walk with you. And now, on the other side, you see it clearly. The betrayal had purpose. The pain was permission. The loss was leverage. All of it led you here. The ones who mocked your process are about to witness your promise. The ones who doubted your potential are about to see proof. Not for revenge, not for ego, but because God loves to make tables in the presence of those who never believed you'd eat again. This isn't about payback. It's about purpose fulfilled. And you're not coming back the same. You're coming back with fire in your eyes and prophecy on your shoulders. Chosen one, they didn't expect you to rise with clarity. They didn't think you'd find your balance again. But you did. Not because it was easy, but because God was anchoring you in the unseen. You've learned how to stand even when your knees shook. You've learned how to love even when it hurt. And you've learned how to move in silence when the noise got loud. They don't know about the nights you couldn't sleep, the moments you questioned your own reflection, the silent breakdowns behind brave faces. But God knows. And that's why this turning is so personal. You never needed them to believe in you. You only needed God to confirm you. And He did. That's why the same people who tried to bury you are now confused by your bloom. They're whispering about your rise because they can't explain it. They can't trace it. Because God didn't use their system to bless you. He didn't use their platform to promote you. He built you in secret so He could reveal you in glory. You're walking now with an awareness they can't shake. You don't entertain small talk because you're carrying big oil. You're not interested in being liked. You're interested in being led. You don't react to every attack. You recognize it as spiritual distraction. The version of you that's emerging is untouchable, not because life is perfect, but because your trust in God is unshakable. They tried to make you doubt yourself, but in trying, they accidentally pushed you closer to your source. And in the presence of God, you remembered who you were. Not what they said, not what they assumed, but what heaven always knew. You were never ordinary. You were never random. You were selected, anointed, equipped. The pain didn't define you. It exposed you. The war didn't destroy you. It revealed your weapon. And that weapon was never anger. It was never revenge. It was always faith. You've been walking around with power you didn't even realize you had. That's what happens after evil fails. You stop explaining, and you start expressing. Not with your words, but with your walk. Your energy doesn't ask for recognition. It commands respect. You show up now as the storm, not the survivor. You are the evidence that divine reversals are real. You're the living result of what happens when evil doesn't win. And there's more coming. More that eyes haven't seen. More that ears haven't heard. Because God is not finished showing them who you really are. You're not done surprising them. You're not done ascending. This is not a comeback. This is a continuation of something eternal. The light on your life was not dimmed. It was hidden for a season until the stage was ready. And now, the stage is set. The light is rising. And you, chosen one, are about to walk into the chapter they never saw coming. They tried to steal your joy, but it multiplied. They tried to hijack your future, but it was rewrote. They tried to taint your name, but God purified it. You are walking in a purity of purpose now that no accusation can stain. You are holding peace that no chaos can break. And you are receiving rewards that no plot can block. That's what it looks like when God turns it. They couldn't destroy you. They only revealed how deeply you were rooted. And now that you've survived the pruning, it's harvest time. You're not rebuilding. You're expanding. You're not restarting. You're advancing. And the ones who thought you'd never be more than what they saw, they're about to witness a reality that blows their projections to dust. Your name is safe in heaven's mouth. Your steps are ordered. Your back is covered. What they meant for evil only exposed how far God is willing to go to preserve your purpose. The attacks were real. The pain was personal. But the outcome? Supernatural. Chosen one, they never saw it coming. Not the glory, not the glow, not the greatness that would be born from the very situation they crafted to destroy you. They had it all mapped out, the sabotage, the setups, the whispers behind doors you were never supposed to walk through. But what they didn't understand is that when evil tries to write your ending, God picks up the pen and drafts a new beginning. Not a quiet one. A beginning that roars. A beginning that shakes the same ground they tried to bury you beneath. This wasn't survival. It was strategy. Divine strategy. Heaven used their evil as material for your breakthrough. And every time you were counted out, God counted you in. You are not the result of what they did. You are the result of what God allowed, redeemed, and redefined. That's why they can't understand how you came out of it better, stronger, wiser, because they still see the scene. But you've already stepped into the sequel. They thought they were pulling strings, but they didn't realize God was holding the whole blueprint. They saw your moments of weakness and mistook them for permanent collapse. They watched your silence and assumed surrender. But God was holding you still while He moved the pieces around. They didn't know the silence was sacred. They didn't know the delay was deliberate. They didn't know the pain had a prophecy attached to it. There's a shift happening in your favor, and it started the moment God turned what they meant to poison you into the potion that healed you. You don't just carry pain, you carry power. You don't just remember the betrayal, you wear the wisdom. And now, when you enter a room, something shifts. Because you don't walk in as who they knew. You walk in as who God revealed. Some still speak of who you used to be. Let them. Their memory is still trapped in the season God freed you from. But you're not stuck there. You're not limited by their opinion, nor are you imprisoned by their comfort zone. You've outgrown what once fit. Emotionally, spiritually, energetically. That's why the old connections feel foreign. That's why the old rooms feel too small. Because you're not who you were when they tried to ruin you. There's something about being crushed that brings clarity. When you hit the lowest places, you start to see with heaven's eyes. You realize that not everyone who smiled was sincere. Not every compliment was clean. Not every hand stretched out was meant to lift. But even that realization was part of the turning. Because now, you choose wisely. You speak carefully. You move with precision. And all of that was born from what they meant to destroy you. You've become immune to their tactics. You don't flinch when they gossip. You don't shrink when they gather. Because you know now, their unity was built on insecurity. Their alliance was temporary. Their plans lacked spiritual permission. And that's why they failed. That's why they're confused. They launched a full attack on your life, and still, God allowed the dust to settle in your favor. The truth is, you're intimidating now. Not because of pride, but because you carry peace. And peace is terrifying to people who are fueled by drama. You don't respond the way you used to. You don't react, chase, or explain. You observe. You discern. You walk away. And that's unsettling to those who used to feed on your reactions. They miss the old version of you, not because they loved you, but because they could control you. And now that you've been turned by God, you're no longer easy to manipulate. God preserved the best of you through the worst of them. That's the miracle. That's the twist. You didn't lose your heart. You didn't lose your essence. You didn't lose your purpose. Even when they tried to strip you bare, God wrapped you in grace. Even when they tried to drown you in lies, God lifted you with truth. You may have walked through shadows, but you were never in darkness. Because the light inside you never went out. It just flickered long enough to show you who couldn't handle your flame. Chosen one, you are about to experience reward in the very place they tried to ruin you. It's not about showing off. It's about showing what God can do. Your life is becoming a demonstration of divine reversal. A mirror that reflects, not pain, but providence. And the same ones who helped break you will have to watch God bless you. Not in vengeance, but in visibility. Because God does not hide his works when they're finished. He places them on display. They thought your ending would be shame, but God said your ending would be shine. They assumed the rejection would stop your journey, but God used it to reroute you to an even better destination. And what they cursed in the dark, God is about to crown in the light. You're not just surviving anymore. You're thriving. You're multiplying. You're harvesting joy where sorrow once grew. Let them see you now. Not to prove anything, but to fulfill prophecy. You were always meant to rise, even if it had to be from ruins. You were always meant to shine, even if the light had to be born from fire, and now there's no denying it. What they meant for evil couldn't hold you, because what's divine can't be destroyed, what's chosen can't be canceled, and what's turned by God never returns to its former state. You're walking in irreversible transformation, the kind of change that doesn't need applause to feel real, the kind of glow that isn't borrowed, it's birthed, the kind of authority that's not loud, it's quiet thunder. They'll look at you and not recognize the strength, because they only remember the breaking, not the rebuilding. They only saw the collapse, not the resurrection. They only knew your name when it was wrapped in rumors, not when it was written in victory. And now, the ground you're walking on has shifted. The air around you has changed, because you're no longer walking in survival mode. You're walking in promise. And every step is a reminder to the enemy. You didn't win. You tried, and you failed, because the hand of God was too heavy on this one. The anointing was too strong, the destiny too deep. And now the fruit is undeniable. You will never walk the same again. Not because the road changed, but because you did. The pain did something. The betrayal did something. It didn't make you bitter. It made you bulletproof. You learned to listen deeper, to trust slower, to give wiser. And that's what they didn't count on. They thought the evil would end you, but it only began the real you. Chosen one, what was forged in the dark is now shining in the light. You were built when no one was watching, when no one was applauding, when no one believed. You were built in moments of private struggle, silent endurance, and secret obedience. While they talked, God was teaching. While they plotted, God was preparing. While they laughed, God was lifting. And now, what they meant for evil has become the foundation of your elevation. You've reached the point where the past no longer has the power to sting. Not because you forgot, but because you forgave. Not because it didn't matter, but because God mattered more. Your healing has become your armor. You've faced storms that should have swallowed you whole. You've endured losses that should have left you hollow. But look at you now, still whole, still radiant, still chosen. They tried to make you doubt your value. They tried to make you second-guess your worth. But every attempt only led you deeper into truth. You no longer need outside affirmation. You don't wait for applause to feel anointed. You don't seek validation from people who were never assigned to recognize your greatness. What you carry now comes from God alone, pure, unstoppable, undeniable. They meant to sabotage your future, but they didn't realize that every attack was pushing you closer to the door God had already opened. That door wasn't built with wood or stone. It was carved from purpose, lined with timing, sealed with divine promise. And now, you're standing in front of it. Not asking, not begging, just walking through it with the kind of grace that silences every false narrative they ever tried to pin on you. This isn't just a comeback. This is a coronation. This is the moment heaven confirms what the earth once rejected. And those who tried to sabotage you, they will see it. Not because you need them to see, but because God wants them to witness the turning. Because the turning wasn't just for you, it was for testimony, so that others would see the reversal, so that others would learn you cannot curse what God has covered.